Hello, everybody. Welcome to October 15th meeting for the OLM Dev Feature Planning meeting. I'm going to hand it off to Kevin, who's going to lead the meeting today.
Hey, folks. So I think there's a couple of things on the current proposed agenda. In addition to that, I think last time we only got through about half of the list. So I think unless anybody has any strong objections, I'm just going to work through the three things on the top, and then we'll circle back to everything else that was from last week, assuming, it looks like Chris is on the call. So I think he had quite a few things he wanted to go over. I don't know if we want to drive it that way or not, but I think it probably makes the most sense. So before we even start looking at RFEs, one thing that came out of the meeting 2 weeks ago is sort of a need and a desire to more explicitly define our release process. And as part of that that really heavily ties into, I think, this meeting, because this meeting is mostly about looking through our backlog items and making sure that they are basically assigned appropriately to the correct releases. So I have a work in progress PR. Actually, maybe it'd be better if I share my screen. Hold on one second. All right, let me know when you guys can see it.
I can see it.
Great. Okay, yeah, so I put up a work in progress PR earlier today. I'm sure nobody has really had a chance to take a look at it because, like I said, I just did it. So the goal of this document that I wrote is basically just to describe the scope and the process around release. So I want to call out just a couple of quick things here. And like I said, this is a work in progress, so please comment on the PR if you have thoughts or ideas. But basically, it defines a set of roles, the actual process in terms of how we decide when we're going to release, as well as what content is going to be included in the release. And then a short section on a schedule for the current release and any future releases, as well as our support statements around those. So if I want to just spend 2 minutes taking a look at this. So basically, our process is around building minor releases. That's sort of the main objective of our release process. Our schedule is going to be basically every 3 months to coincide with a cube release. We're going to bump the cube version, and then anything else that is part of that release will also go out. That is, I think, our only explicit we're going to do our best to keep like a timed release schedule. So in addition to that, we also are going to have some manner of patch release, which we've done historically, but it is more ad hoc. Basically, if there are any major issues with the release or things that need to go in before we cut another minor release, that's when we'll cut patch releases. There's some conversation in here around what that process looks like. So the idea is basically when it's time to cut a release, a project maintainer will create an issue with preliminary patch notes. And at that time, we basically need project reviewers and project approvers to take a look at it, LGTM, and approve it. And then when that happens, at the time that the issue is created for the release, we'll also send out a notification on the mailing list for a 48-hour comment period. If that comment period goes by without any major issues, and we have at least 2 reviewers and a quorum of approvers to agree to the release, that's when we'll go and cut. let's see, is there anything else major in here? Oh, the only other thing I want to call out, which is sort of directly related to the process around this meeting, is that so the content of what goes in a given release is defined by issues in the project that have that release milestone label attached to it. So anything that is currently in that is not closed at the time that a release candidate is suggested, that means that either that release is invalid or the project approvers need to go and manually remove that milestone from the release. And they need to vote and agree on that ahead of time. So yeah, that's like those are like, I think the major concepts that I'm sort of trying to define here. If you guys could take some time and take a look at that PR, that would be really helpful. I know this is just kind of like me noodling my thoughts. So if there are bad ideas in here or other people have issues with any of it, let me know and we can try to work that out. Okay. All right. So yeah, let's move on. Let's see. So an RFE tracking cert manager or service CA operator. So Alex, you created this one last week. Do you want to speak to it a little bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to announce everybody that's interested in, features. We had a meeting last week for the OLM Dev working group, and it came up that there was a lot of incentive to tie into existing solutions for cert management rather than leaving it with OLM at this point. So just to give a very high background on OLM cert management, OLM will generate self-signed certificates that are valid for 2 years, and for webhooks, all three types, admission, conversion, validating, mutating, and conversion webhooks, as well as API services. And these, after these certificates expire, it will rotate them. But OLM implemented the self-signed certs in a fairly rudimentary way. They probably don't meet a lot of customers' requirements when they're like setting up a policy regarding self-signed certificates or CAs. So I created this issue, and it would be great if everybody in the community could just jump on this and add some comments, just highlighting some of the use cases and why they want to see this change implemented, so that we can take that back and actually implement the solution. So this is just a good starting point to collect ideas. So if everybody wants this, please comment on it.
Yeah, Alex, in the thread that this whole thing spawned from, did you post in there saying that you did this?
Yes, I linked it. I linked the issue in the agenda for the OLM Dev working group.
Well, what I'm saying is you have a thread in the OLM Dev Slack channel, and where you talked with these guys directly about it, and you could just maybe say, hey, I created this RFE, please comment on it there. Because they actually created a Medium article last night around this whole thing.
Sorry, where, could you link the thread? I'm not cognizant of the...
Yeah, this is the thread. Let's see here. It came from this guy named, who was it? Adam Roberts on the 9th.
Is that not the one about webhooks rather than certs?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was related to it because he was trying to create the certificate because he got confused and you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Oh, we did have some discussion about it at the last meeting where we wrote down some reasons that how OLM currently does it is not ideal, and that it would probably be more work to improve OLM than to get a proper cert solution in. So I'll grab those notes from the last dev meeting notes and put those in as well. Yeah, great. And okay, yeah, that's basically what I wanted. I did generate this issue using like some of the very high level points that
came out of that meeting. I just wanted to make sure that if somebody had a point that wasn't captured, that they knew this existed and they had the opportunity to append additional information to this ticket.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. That's all I really had to say to this one. Kevin, would you mind going to the next one?
Yeah, the only other thing I want to just very quickly do is, since we've talked about it, I just want to set a milestone on this. For now, I'm just going to put backlog, unless someone has a very strong opinion that this absolutely needs to be in 0.17.
Yeah, and do you want to define what backlog means?
So I think basically backlog just means not in a current planned release. And at the moment, the only release we have explicitly planned out is 0.17.
Right. And if the reason we're putting it in the backlog is because we think it's a valid request, right? Like if we didn't think it's something we could or should do, what would we do then?
So I think in that case, we would just not mark it with a milestone. I don't know that we'd explicitly want to close an issue at that time, because I think that there's probably a valid conversation depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, is there any labeling you want to do, saying you've already triaged it or anything like that, or?
That's a good point. Maybe, I don't know. Do we want to just add a triage label for something where we haven't set the milestone? Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, that's typically what I do in my repos.
Okay, so actually, if you could make a comment on the PR I have open around the release governance to that effect, I'm going to try to remember. I'm going to write it down now to include that. But that's probably something that needs to get added to that document.
Yeah,
we probably need to flesh out that a little bit more in the doc, I think, than what's there right now. Okay.
There is one more thing that's slightly orthogonal to this issue at hand, but it does revolve around something that people had asked for the service, or sorry, the webhook certs. OLM now mounts the certs by default into the same location that that queue builder will look for the webhook certs by default. So you should no longer have to change the webhook ports the webhook directories and the name of the files, which should make using the webhook stuff slightly easier. Because I know that came up a lot yesterday, and it's kind of a feature, and I just wanted to address it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you want to capture that somewhere?
I'll add it to the agenda.
Okay. I think that this next one is not the right link, but I think I saw it. Ooh. Yeah, this is 1804. I'll update the link. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so Alex, you created this one as well. Do you want to speak to it? I know you're not doing two things at once. So.
Yeah, one second. Okay, loading the page. So this was just an RFE created to capture a feature request from James Hewitt, I believe his name is. He requested, he recommended that like OLM provide users an opportunity to install an operator with permissions, kind of like you'd install an application on an Android phone, where it outlines specific permissions that the operator is going to require, and then you could enable or disable them. I want to I just wanted to do the same thing here as I did with the previous issue, make sure that everybody knew this existed and collect feedback. You can see that Nick already brought up a related proposal that exists. And so we could, if everybody could just review that and then circle back to the issue and comment on whether or not they think that might meet the needs, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this is semi-covered with the writable operator API. Is that sort of what we're saying? I don't know if it's, I don't know if that's necessarily like the whole story, but I think that's probably worth it looking at.
Yeah, I think the difference is between the two. The only thing that I mentioned, hi, it's James. The only thing that I mentioned that might be different from that one, I think, at the link that Nick posted, was I don't think that version specifies being able to make a permission optional, which I think is quite a compelling argument for a lot of the enterprise customers that we have. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that there's already a proposal about it, and that's awesome.
Okay. Yeah, that bit makes sense to me. You're specifically talking about this last line, essentially, that if the operator was aware of what permissions it was or wasn't getting, it could like make decisions about what features it would make available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for now, I'm going to set this one to backlog as well.
Yep.
Unless anybody has any objections, and then we can move on. Okay. So Alex, you added this one as well?
Oh, that was just
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we already talked about it.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to talk about this anymore? Or are you?
Nope, that's all I had to say.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move to our backlog of issues that we wanted to discuss last week, or 2 weeks ago, rather. So Chris, there's quite a few things here. Is this like ordered in terms of importance?
No, it was just kind of a brain dump, like 10 minutes before the meeting to make sure I got a couple things. And of course, I wish I would have gone back and re-reviewed it all. So yeah, we could just go top down if you want.
Okay. All right, I'm going to skip over the 1.0 conversation because I think that's a larger discussion and we might want to have it during the working group. So let's just go to the next one. Oh, okay. Looks like we actually looked at this one already last week. And I think we did on this one as well. Just want to double check. Yeah, this one already has a milestone set. Okay, operator rollbacks. Okay, this is not on our Upstream project.
No, I didn't create an RFE for that.
Okay.
These are just general topics, and we can decide whether we want RFPs for these or not. All right, so operator rollbacks in general, I think we brought it up a little, may have been a couple of meetings ago, and Evan talked a little bit about it, and we talked about ideas about how we maybe have, I guess, a downgrade graph is a potential way of identifying if rollbacks are possible, and then some kind of way of describing, I guess, situations in which rollbacks are safe versus not safe. Like, for example, don't do a rollback if you've, put a CRD on, you've already got CRs created in it, right? Because you can't. How do you undo that work? I think that just all needs to be captured somehow, and I can't remember what that issue was. I thought that was something that that must have been an OpenShift issue there.
Yeah, it looked like it.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, if you want, what I can do is I can capture and create an RFE for this. I just wanted to call it out.
Yeah, I think that this is a commonly requested feature. I think that there are a lot of caveats to doing or to defining a rollback framework. And if you can, when you go and create that issue, we should probably try to call those out.
Yeah.
And I think that should at least get the discussion started.
Yeah, I'll work on that for next time.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So procedure for hot fixing an operator.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, this is really about what's the right way for customers to patch their CSV, right? So, and we're actually trying to, so we talked, Evan actually talked about below saying, yeah, actually that's designed. We just don't want to make sure the CSV ever got reconciled with the catalog, which would blow away the changes. And then is there another thing that we need to have in there so OLM knows that you've hot fixed it, and then maybe pause automatic updates. There's a bunch of other thoughts around this. But I think what we're doing temporarily is we're going to submit a PR for a test case that at least verifies that the current behavior does not get rolled back or doesn't get erased.
So this is sort of interesting because I think we've explicitly run into some issues in the other direction over the last couple of weeks. Basically, because the installed resources don't get reconciled after their initial application. So we have an issue where basically, so there's this problem in Upstream Cube where garbage collector, when it sees cross namespace references, so basically if you have an owner ref on either onto a cluster scope resource or across namespaces, there's a case where the garbage collector will go and just delete resources associated with that in the namespace. And that's a problem because what we saw on a running production cluster is that a service account essentially just got deleted. And because OLM currently today just does nothing, it does not attempt to reapply that service account forcefully. It just was sitting in the water dead, and OLM couldn't do anything to automatically fix that. Basically, the user needs to go and delete the CSV and recreate the subscription to reinstall the operator. And I'm wondering if the solution for this problem is not to get back to this request. I think that I'm wondering if the solution to this is not that the CSV should just never be reconciled and that we should make a test to make sure that never happens, but rather that we should have a more first-class way to support a workflow like this. For example, we could have an option in the subscription that prevents newer versions to get applied, something like that.
Newer versions to get applied.
Right, like the problem is you want to modify the CSV, have that change reflect on the cluster, and then don't want that to get overwritten automatically.
So changing the subscription to manual wouldn't do that?
But it doesn't, right? It doesn't, right? Well, so right now it doesn't because, or right now, right, what we're saying is we don't want the CSV in the catalog to reapply to the cluster.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is right now we don't do that just because that's how OLM works. If we were to make a change which said automatically reapply, automatically reconcile when there's a diff between what the CSV in the catalog says and what the CSV on the cluster says, right? Like if we wanted to add a feature like that, then that would break this. But I think it's probably valid that we want to start thinking about treating CSVs that way. And so instead, I was suggesting, what if there was an option that said, "Hey, I'm in this hotfix mode. Don't do it." If that makes sense.
I'm not, so Evan might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm of the impression that OLM doesn't reapply CSVs if you set it to a manual install mode.
There's two different things here, right? Like there's OLM applying new CSVs and OLM re-reconciling the existing CSV when there isn't an update.
I mean, so you're talking about the case where somebody hotfixed one version of the CSV and then they're going to install that operator in a separate namespace, and you don't want.
No, I'm suggesting that right now, like when you apply the CSV, that's just it, right? Like the operator gets installed, and if you go and modify that CSV, you can make changes to the operator installation.
Right.
What OLM does not do is then go see that the CSV has been modified and say, "Hey, that's wrong. That's not what the catalog says," and then reapply the CSV manually. But like OLM doing that on its own. So you can make like today, technically, you can go and make changes to the CSV, even though something else applied it initially.
Right. So I think what you're saying is really two features. One, the feature I'm asking for is to preserve that behavior, right, where it doesn't get re-reconciled, and write a test case in the regression bucket so that if somebody does sneak in a new feature in the future that does do that, this test would fail, right? And then if this other new feature, which doesn't exist, basically, saying make sure my CSVs are good, that feature needs to include a feature that allows you to opt out from that. So aren't we asking for two separate features?
So I guess, yeah, if you wanted to think about it that way, yes.
The reason why I'm asking this is because I have a problem now. I need a way to patch hotfix operators today, and I can't wait 6 months for a feature. So we're gonna do this, right? And so I need it documented, saying, "Hey, this is how it's gonna work," and then this is a valid feature of how you hotfix things. Customers, this is how you're supposed to do it. And then later on, if we decide we want to do it differently, then we create a feature for that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I guess I'm suggesting that asking for a test that says this isn't regressing right now isn't really a feature request as much as it is a test someone needs to go write.
Right, and my team is writing that test right now.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fair, and I think it's fine for us to go ahead and merge something like that. I guess what I'm saying is, in terms of an RFE, the RFE here isn't that this behavior should always work. The RFE is, what does this look like as a first-class feature?
Yeah, it can be. Really, what I want the RFE to be is just documentation, formal documentation about how we can do this now. If you want to have something more robust, I can create a second feature for how to do this better. Or don't you want to do it that way? Don't you want to support what you've got right now?
I guess my hesitation is, I think that this, like a few other things that currently exist in OLM, I don't know that it was intentionally built this way. Rather that this is an artifact of other decisions around architecture on the catalog reconciliation side.
Okay.
I think I can maybe help fill in some gaps there. The feature that persists the changes that you make from a CSV to the deployment, which is I think what we're talking about, is intentional, and it's intentional to support specifically the local development workflow, which I don't know that is as relevant in a post operator SDK world But the idea is like if you have a CSV and you're iterating on your operator, you just go and you can edit the image that it points to and have it see it roll out and things like that. The subscription is a layer above it, almost like the relationship between like a deployment and a pod. So there's a layer above it that controls what CSV gets created. That doesn't mean that like you shouldn't be able to write that API directly. And I think that what we're saying is it makes a lot of sense to preserve that behavior and also have an option so that if you have a subscription and you don't want it to be possible for those things to be edited, that's probably is a reasonable default as well. But then you have to opt into the ability to edit a CSV that's managed by a subscription. Does that capture the current? I think
so.
that's what I heard. Okay.
All right, can one of you guys capture that in that RFE? Because I'm not sure if I'm going to get it right. Because at the end of the day, I really need to write the PR, and I need basically something stating what you just said, right, in documentation somewhere. So I can give. So I'm giving my support team, my level 3 team, instructions on how to update operators when we need like a Saturday night patch for something, and this is kind of the only way to do it.
There is a test for this, but you said something about a regression bucket, and I think that's probably missing from the test. In other words, like the explanation for why it shouldn't be removed is probably missing from the test, and we should ensure that that's recorded so that if someone goes and changes it in the future, we at least consider that reason rather than just deleting the test.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that's sort of my biggest argument right now, which is that like a lot of this is tribal and should probably be more explicitly called out. I think it's fair to call these things out, probably start with the issue, and then once we have some of those thoughts written down, we can do something more formalized in documentation.
So do you want to keep this in the backlog, or do you want to move this towards a milestone so we could actually act on it, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I think that that's probably a good idea. Basically, we'll say this is 017, and the result of this issue is that we'll just have documentation and a test that describes this current behavior.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then I'll take this as an action item to go and write down some more explicit thoughts on this when I have some time.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look at the next one. So diagnostic tooling improvements, including adding graph visualizations, dry run and failed install plan execution recovery procedures, CRD tendency visibility.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff in there.
Yep.
So yeah, in a nutshell, we're having a heck of a time trying to figure out why stuff doesn't get installed. When you have to enable debug, you have to disable Cincinnati, you got to enable debug. It is super hard to find out why things get stuck in upgrade pending, for example. Looking at events isn't always obvious. So there's just a whole bunch of debug and usability things for when bad things happen that I think it'd be really nice to have some better tooling around that for diagnostic tooling.
So to start with, I definitely agree. I think we have some issues specifically with bubbling a lot of this stuff up. I think in general, we have been spending a lot of time trying to handle individual issues related to this. Like, for example, we spent a whole bunch of time trying to include, as we worked on the dependency resolution in 016, we spent a lot of time talking about and working on improving logging and messaging around dependencies and why they were either being found or not being found. So that's an example. This is, I think, kind of less specific. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, do we have either a specific list of all the edge cases we're finding problematic, or is what we're actually looking for something that is like a diagnostic extracting thing that can look at the scope of an entire cluster and then figure out, hey, what's going on and what's wrong with OLM in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking in the context of a subscription, right? So if a subscription is created, then you want to know the entire life cycle of the decisions that are being made and or what will be made, right? So I have like including a graph of visualizations. It'd be really great if there could be like a dry run capability saying, hey, if you create this subscription with this channel, or this channel will be picked automatically, and this is the whole tree of stuff that's going to get created in your cluster. It could create a bunch of install plans. You could create a bunch of other subscriptions. And by the way, they're not going to work because the dependency doesn't get met. Right now, you kind of have to act on it and then pick up all the pieces when it doesn't work. And then there's not enough information to be able to even know what pieces to pick up. So I think there's a workflow opportunity here to make the whole graph decision-making process and then the application of that graph through install plans and subscriptions a little bit more transparent through normal kube APIs rather than in diagnostic logs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I definitely do know what you mean, and I agree. I think that at a high level, this is something we've been talking about a lot ourselves as well. I'd like to call out a couple of different things. So I mentioned the dependency resolver. The resolver in general, though, that we rebuilt in 016 was kind of designed to be able to start solving some of these problems. So we didn't get a chance to necessarily generically solve everything that we're describing. But like, for example, a dry run is now something that is achievable, I think, with the current resolver, because the current resolver now has the ability to inspect the cluster and make decisions about what it will be able to do before it actually attempts a resolution, which was not the case before. So I think that's one thing that we're definitely, that I think is definitely on the table. I think dry run specifically would be something that would be its own feature on its own, though. And so I think one of the other things more generically that we would like to look at is we have our new operator API. The operator API is kind of the thing that should be aggregating the status of all the various things, subscription, install plan, CSV, and the catalogs that they're subscribed to, that I think over time should be improved to contain all the kind of status stuff that you're describing in the case where you've already done the install and something is now going wrong. There are some problems with that, though, which we've encountered that I think we don't have trivial solutions to. And I think that the biggest problem that we're facing right now that we need to solve before we can really go and do a lot of that stuff is specifically around the operator scoping problems that we've been having. So like, for example, one of the issues that we're running into with scoping is the way it works right now is in a given namespace, all of the operators are resolved as a group, and that's done intentionally because of the way that we are scoping installs. And a lot of that has to do with some of the problems we've had with trying to support multi-tenancy, or at least our sort of subset of multi-tenancy around like the way we've built operator groups. I don't know that we have like trivial solutions to those problems, but I think that looking at that problem more holistically and trying to solve it either by, I mean, we've been throwing around ideas around like either removing our tenancy solution in general, or by trying to, we've been working with the multi-tenancy SIG for a while now to try to see if they have a way around this problem. I don't know that we have sat down and come to a singular solution. But I think without that, we're always going to kind of have these sort of UX warts and issues with scoping, like what set of things should we be bubbling up to and where? Because, right, like fundamentally, for example, if the operator API is a cluster scope resource right now, then most users who are installing these things, if they're not cluster admins, are just not going to have access to that data. So I think that's somewhat still a work in progress. And I don't know that we have like trivial solutions to all of that.
This is Nick. I don't know if we talked about this yet, but I know we have a story floating around for surfacing how the results of a dependency resolution through Cube API. Like that is a story that we have under the hood. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin. But I know Ben Luddy did some preliminary sketch work on it. And that would basically be able to tell you when you're trying to resolve this specific operator or a set of operators, if you're unable to resolution, exactly what problems occurred, what things were checked, what constraints couldn't be met.
And Ben did share a little command line Go tool in his little sandbox he was playing around with, but I didn't realize there was actually kind of a story or a feature or RFE behind that.
Yeah, there is one, and it's kind of difficult to like figure out the best UX, I think, for displaying that data, kind of like that Kevin was talking about. Even if we weren't trying to, pinpoint which operator it belongs to, it's like, how do you accurately explain to a user this set of constraints that goes into a SAT solver? Why it failed. So that would be hard, and it would be nice to get input on that, like what would make sense to a user there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess, all right, so this is kind of on me, I guess, to some degree, because I need to kind of maybe hone in on what I'm looking for. So what I was hoping is that as you guys have been developing test cases, you've felt the pain at trying to figure some of this out and have kind of come up with some other ideas in the back of your head of ways that we could do it. So more or less, I'm just kind of calling out all the issues and problems that we're running into. And I think maybe we need probably some kind of collaboration, out of the box thinking on how we want to actually surface that. And I just had some ideas, the graph visualization is a dry one thing. Whatever, if you have information about why an install plan failed halfway through, what a person can do about it. you know, that kind of stuff. And I realize a lot of these things are hard to do, especially when you don't have all the information. So
Yeah.
Well, by failed halfway through, you mean like failed to apply a specific resource?
a lot of times, yeah, a lot of times we'll see the install plan created, and then it goes ahead and tries to apply the install plan, and it just doesn't work. There's like pieces of it that didn't get installed for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
we should-
actually. Sorry, go ahead.
It's probably either a bug on the install plan side or a UX gap on the install plan that it's not showing you the specific resources that failed to apply, because that would help, right? Immediately.
Right. But the install plan is hidden from from my perspective, using the UI all the time in OpenShift, right? So all these things are hidden from the customer, right? So they don't actually see the fact there isn't even an install plan that it covers. They see their CSV, and then they see it commingled with their subscription in the same artifact, and then things kind of just show up and disappear and then duplicate, and there's a whole UI problem there, which doesn't make it at all obvious what's really going on under the covers.
I think that's improved in 4.6, hasn't it? Where there's a specific page for while it's installing, not showing all the stuff going up and down.
Yeah, I've seen that working to some degree.
Yeah, but yeah, the debug thing is definitely hard. I mean, we often go and look at the job logs in the OLM produce for when installs happen, and that's where we often find bugs that we couldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah. So yeah, part of this is that the OLM team used to control the section of the console that deals with OLM resources. It used to be pretty much just the kubectl experience in the console, where you just see the resources. They were simple enough to make sense. At some point, we relinquished that control, and the prevailing thought was that customers don't want to see the sausage being made. They want to see a nice normalized pane of glass. So we can definitely, and I think we have been already speaking to them about kind of getting back to just kind of show me the resources that are going on rather than trying to interpret what's going on for me, because it should be simple enough from the API perspective. But that's really something for the console team. We can go and have something to talk to them more about that. But they already were aware that this was a problem, and they've been trying to improve the install plan screen.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know if that helps. Like the more pertinent stuff here would be like in kubectl, how hard is it to figure out what's going on?
Right. And it's hard because you have to have trace on today to find most problems, at least from our perspective.
I mean, I would assume that if you watch for install plans in the namespace that you're installing something, you'd see them come up, and then you look at the status.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to get an install plan.
Yeah.
A lot of times,
So that's
install plan's already been created.
Right. So that's something for us, right? So the subscription is not showing what's going wrong when a resolution
Correct.
is failing, which is something
Exactly.
I think we've captured here.
Yep. Yeah, so your subscription is just kind of stuck sitting there doing nothing, saying upgrade pending, or it says it's installing but it's not. So it's just all sorts of little weird states it can get in.
Yeah, that's not good. So yeah, I think we can capture that.
So I guess what I can do then is I can create an RFE specifically around capturing subscription events. Right, so what I'll do is create one specifically around including more information within the subscription.
So in the past, we had stories around subscription status and making it better, specifically about this thing. I think we decided that pursuing the operator API would be a better place for this information to go. But it may make sense to bring this back under the subscription, like you're saying, because it's almost a stability issue.
Well, the problem is we don't know when that operator API is going to be here. So and we're going to be stuck with a version, of OLM 16.1 for a long time. So there might be an opportunity to backport certain, if the features aren't huge, to backport them to 16, for example, because we're going to be using that as our long-term service release or EUS release for the next 18 months.
When was 0.16 cut? Because I believe, right, like as of right now in master, the operator API is on.
But that's read only, right?
Yes, but I think that is all we're saying, right? That like when you go and create your subscription, then you look at the operator API for status right now.
All right, so you're going to get a sister. You're going to basically get this other operator instance for every subscription you create as a read-only kind of indicator of what's going on. And that could be, so I should take a look at that and see if that shows me more relevant information. And if it doesn't, we would add more relevant information to their operator API rather than the subscription API.
Yeah, I think that's depending on what it is, it either end up in the operator API or both the operator API and the subscription, because the operator API should be an aggregate of all of the various resources used and required to install on the cluster. So it should have like status about not just the subscription, but also the install plan and the CSV.
Yeah. So here's the deal. I don't actually know if what we're describing here isn't already covered by stories we have in our backlog. So we do have stories for describing the outcome of resolutions and the status of a resolution. The operating API already has stories for aggregating up the state of those things, right, generically. So maybe it makes sense to file this, and then we can go back and link in all of the things that cover it and see if there's any gaps.
All right, so I'll create the RFE, and then you guys will go ahead and cross-link them back to whatever internal stories that are available.
I think that'll give us the best chance of figuring out if we're missing anything.
Okay, awesome.
And thanks for being flexible with that.
Yeah, I understand. So the next two on the list, I think we can skip over those, and I think we're out of time anyway. The one I would like someone to maybe can do offline. I know there's a compound constraint feature story someplace. If someone could just put a link to that here so I could find that. I couldn't find it anywhere. I've seen it in, basically it's the and or stuff within the dependencies YAML. I don't know where the enhancement request for that is, though I've seen lots of references and talk about it. So if someone could just put a link to that or create an RFE for me so we could start tracking that thing.
Yeah, I'll take a look for that and try to find the link.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I think we're at time. So unless anybody has anything else that is burning inside, I think we should call this for today.
I'm good. I'm not going to torture you anymore.
All right. Thanks a lot, folks.
Right.
We will see you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.